Hello everyone and welcome back to a new build guide. This is the Stunlock build that allows you to stunlock and defeat all bosses in the game at every difficulty level. To achieve our goal, we are using multiple sources of focus cost reduction along with focus gain increase, using affixes that are only available to you at low health. If the prospect of playing at low health is intimidating to you as a new player, I'm also here to tell you that there are a lot of defensive measures built into this build, and you should not be afraid of picking it up and playing with it. There are a lot of moving parts to the build. However, the actual mechanics behind the build are pretty simple and should be pretty intuitive for new players also. With that out of the way, let's start our diving into the build components. As always, there are videos included of pestilence bosses that you can look at while we are going the way of build explanation. So, as mentioned before, the build works with low health. If that is still an issue for you, you can try a different version of this build using the magical version of the weapon. And this is what a typical setup for that route will look like. You'll want stagger damage increase and plague damage infusion on your weapon. The third affix is up to you. You can choose whatever you want. And for your infusion, let's get started with the actual build breakdown, and I will explain it as we go through. So as mentioned before, we are using the Brutish Cudgel. The weapon comes with Crushing Slam as its native rune, and we are keeping it because this is a really good gap closer. Next, we have Crushing Quad. This is not mandatory to the build. This is the native rune of Bedded Club, and it also drops in the Crucible. If you do not have it, you can replace this with any rune of your choosing. Next, we are using Knockdown Swirl. This is a 50 cost rune that does a 350 degree damage around your character, and it's really good if you're getting piled on by enemies. If you do not have Knockdown Swirl, you can also go with Plague Sweep or Fire Sweep or any other rune that is a low cost rune and gives you sort of an AoE clear around your character in case you're being overwhelmed by enemies. Lastly, and the most important part of the build is the Tremor Slam. The build really relies on using this rune, so if you do not have it, you are going to have to see if you can find another rune that actually does the same thing for you. However, this is the only recommendation I have at this point, aside from using Crushing Quad, which is not as effective as Tremor Slam is at staggering your enemies. For your infusion, you can go with Lifesteal, you can go with Health Increase, or you can go with Max Stamina Increase or Stamina Cost Reduction. Lifesteal, contrary to popular belief, is not a great source of healing. Most of your healing in your builds will come from percent heal off of a kill or stagger. And in this particular build, that healing comes from staggering enemies. That is because if you are using plague damage execution, those kills do not count as a kill, and you do not get any of the bonuses from affixes that rely on getting a kill. So next, for your first affix, you want to go for stagger damage increase by 30% at low health. Then you want to go with plague damage infusion, gain 15 focus on kill. You mostly use this affix on smaller enemies that you can kill without executing in order to get your focus back up, like the little leeches that jump out of the plagued enemies. And then you want to go for gain 15% health on staggering an enemy and finish it off with drain focus in combat. For your helmet, you'll want to use a leather piece. Then you want to go for focus gain increase as your infusion, plague damage increase by 15%, focus cost decrease by 20% at low health, healing increase by up to 15% based on durability, damage taken decreased by up to 10% based on durability, and max health decreased by 14%. For your armor, you want to go with a plate piece. You want to infuse it with max health increase by 15%. Then you want to have infected enemy stagger resistance decreased by 30%, focus cost decreased by 25% for 10 seconds after staggering an enemy, damage taken decreased by 30% at low health, and poise defense increased by 10 while charging. And finish it off with max health decrease. For your gloves, you want to go with a set of mesh gloves. You want to infuse it with focus cost reduction by 10%. Execute infected enemies at low health. Infection buildup increased by 20%. Focus gain increased by up to 15% based on durability. Damage taken decreased by up to 10% based on durability. And max health reduction by 14%. For your pants, you want to go with a pair of cloth. And you want to infuse it with stamina cost reduction by 10%. Focus gain increased by up to 15% based on durability. Healing increased by up to 15% based on durability again. Stamina cost decreased by 30% at low health. And damage taken decreased by up to 10% based on durability. Finished off with max health reduction by 14%. As I mentioned before, most, if not all of these infusions and affixes are mandatory. And they are all here to serve very distinctive purposes. If you do not have enough focus generation and focus cost decrease, you're not going to be able to cycle your tremor slam while your enemies are staggered. So I do not recommend changing any of these affixes. However, there are some affixes that you can look at. Namely, if you find it that you're having a hard time with healing, you can add another health gain increase on your gloves if you want to. There is a certain affix here, the poise defense increase by 10%. Arguably, this is interchangeable if you are good at using your utility rune in order to have yourself at maximum poise at all times. So if you can't do that, you can switch this with max health increase based on your max focus. Other than that, as I mentioned before, because the theory behind the build is pretty set in stone, I do not recommend changing anything. However, as always, these builds are sort of a guideline, and you can, if you are able to make any changes and make them better, please do share with the rest of the community. And I do appreciate people who have made changes to the builds that I've posted in the past and made them substantially better. For your rings, you want to go with Stone Tusk Ring, Agility Ring, and Rune Ring. You want to focus on maximum heat and plague resistances here. Hold is not as important. However, it really depends on what you have available to you. That concludes our in-depth look at the build components. I will go ahead and show you the stat screen. Now, before we get to the quick recap, there are a few things I'd like to mention with regards to the weapon and how you should use it. Firstly, you should never start your attack animation with a running attack. This puts you in a huge wind-up animation. What you want to do instead is you want to either start with a dodge roll attack. As you can see, you can execute 4 attacks in roughly the same amount of time that it will take you to do 1 running attack. Alternatively, you can use your normal attack, and what you want to do is you want to learn how to stutter step. And this is how you would do the stutter step. To get the stutter step going, what you really want to do is your second hit needs to be executed at the same time as your character is picking up its club off the ground. This is what I am using in one of the videos that I'm fighting the Echo Knight in the Pestilence Stones, and I use this in order to jump out of his fire and keep attacking him while he's sending out his fire missiles. If you do this a little too quickly, it will put you into the attack chain animation. Sometimes you want to use this, but sometimes you don't want to use it. However, for most of your clears, especially in the Crucible, you really want to get this stutter step mechanic down. Next, the reason why poise is actually very important, and I have that poise increase in my affixes, is because this weapon actually has an infinite charge attack string. And the way you would do that is you execute your first attack, and every attack following up your first attack can be charged. And you can do this charge attack until you basically run out of stamina. Next, you do not want to run this build with fast weight category. If you change into the fast weight category, it completely changes your dodge roll animation and your dodge roll attack. And now all of a sudden your dodge attacks are going to get you killed. So you don't want to do this. If you are making any changes to the build, if you're using different components, make sure that you are either at normal or heavy. Although this is a heavy setup, your character is actually very, very nimble. You have a lot of gap closers and you have pretty decent movement speed. And I will get into more details about that while we go through the Crucible. Lastly, there is a certain downside. Well, there are two certain downsides that you do not want to see while you're doing your Pestilence runs. One is the one that gives enemies 50% stagger resistance, and the other is the one that gives enemies 50% damage reduction at high health. Either one of these can give you a really hard time, but the combination of the two will basically leave your build, it will render it useless, and you're going to have to use your own skills in order to get around that. Two of the boss fights that I've included in this video do happen under such circumstances, so it is doable. However, it's not going to be hard. This is not a shortcoming of the build. This happens with a lot of other builds. This is similar to fighting bosses in water pits, and if you're running a fire build, you're going to have a hard time. That's it for all the information that I can give you on the build. Before we get into the Crucible, let's do a quick recap for people who are here to just look at the build components. Main weapon is the Brutish Cudgel. Our helmet is a leather piece. Our main armor is a plate piece. Our gloves are a set of mesh gloves. And our pants are a pair of cloth pants. Here are the rings. And with that, we can get into the Crucible. Shut up. All right, let's get started. So for this run, I will be taking echoes. I will try my best not to take really overpowered echoes that will turn this build into a one-shot build, because the build actually does have the capacity to do so, as you've seen in the introduction, the highlight parts. But if it does get to that point, because I will try to show you the stagger mechanics on the Echo Knight within this build, but if we can't do that, as always, I will make sure to include footage of an Echo Knight fight without using any echoes. Just use your attack animation to reach enemies that are evasive, like the witches and the dogs and all the other enemies that have evasive maneuvers. Don't run after them. You are running a heavy build, but you have a lot of mobility, as I mentioned. Also, one thing to note, when you see that focus cost reduction under your health bar is when you want to use your high focus cost runes. That includes your attack boost and your poise utility rune. While that's active, your 100 cost runes will effectively turn into 50 cost runes. So even at 50 focus, that attack, that knockback attack is going to knock you. No matter how much focus you have, it doesn't matter. The build has an easy time dispatching all the enemies in a Crucible, even up until level 6 or 7. 6 or 7 is probably when you realize your damage is starting to fall off because the enemies are scaling. So I just wanted to show you a little bit of what it looks like to run through the Crucible without having any damage boosts. Now, one thing to mention with nope. Ooh, I thought I was going to jump to my death. One thing to mention with taking damage boost echoes that rely on getting kills, a lot of your kills will not count as a kill if you are executing your enemy. So keep that in mind. Make sure you kill a lot of those small leeches in order to activate the bonus. As you can see, even though I'm running heavy, I don't really have a hard time outmaneuvering these enemies and going behind them. Here's the big bunk damage for you. And while that's active, let's run our damage boost and let's see if we can deal with these guys. So there's a lot of survivability. This is actually a very unfavorable situation to be in against a large enemy and a shielded knight. But if you can survive that without having any focus available to you to overpower them, it's a good measure of the defenses built into the build. That should give us a little bit of damage reduction boost. Those enemies, these large monstrosities, are immune to stagger while they're charging their grab animation. Just something to mention. Now, I am afraid that I'm getting close to that one-shot territory, so I'm just going to take some utility runes. Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to take any more damage boosts. And it's going to turn the F1 fight into a one-shot fest, and I don't want to do that for purposes of this particular run. The reason why I would recommend using Knockdown Swirl over anything else is that it doesn't have an iframe, but you cannot get knocked out of the attack animation halfway through. Okay, maybe that was a bad idea. That was a lot of damage. All right, I'm not going to take any more echoes. Let's just see. I think I already have too much damage, and I have to apologize for that. It's really hard to gauge it. Just take some utility runes. Making sure I won't die. So here you want to dodge the first attack. And just tremor slam him. And that should knock him down. And just do your 3-hit combo. Tremor him again. And that should finish him off. And you wait for him and hopefully you can parry him. Tremor him. Hit him, but don't tremor him for the second time here. Wait for him to jump away. Here, tremor him. And that should be it. If you try to tremor slam him for the second time here, it will hit him, but he will jump away from the second part of the rune attack. And no matter how much damage you have, it will completely mess up your fight rhythm. And you don't want to do that. That's it pretty much for the build. Pretty straightforward to play. Like I said, beginner friendly, as I mentioned before. It might look a little intimidating at first because you are obviously playing with low health, but as you've seen in the build breakdown, you have a lot of damage reduction. And I did try to show that by taking on some unfavorable matchups during the Crucible run. I don't think there are too many complicated mechanics involved as far as the gameplay goes. Putting the build together was a little challenging, getting everything to work together perfectly. As I said, again, try not to change a lot of the affixes, especially the ones that pertain to focus cost reduction and focus gain increase, because changing any of those will change exactly how much focus you will generate between the staggering of the bosses in order to have enough to run your tremor slam. Again, the focus was on getting essentially 100 cost rune to only cost you around 50 focus, and then also be able to generate enough focus in order to repeat using it while generating enough focus as your enemies are staggered. Hopefully you enjoyed the build. There will be a video of the Echo Knight fight without using any echoes at the end of this section. If you are seeing any improvements that you can make to this build, or please do let me know, and I will make sure to include that in follow-up videos. Also, if you do use some of the builds that I post and you make them your own, put your own spin on it, upload a video, and you like me to feature it in my videos, I would love to do that for the community to enjoy and see something new. Content is drawing up for a lot of us as we're waiting for more updates for the game. So getting more engagement out of the community is the best that we can do while we wait. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. And as always, have a great day and see you in the next build guide. Bye.